Breaking news for Barcelona, it's now official. La Liga and the Spanish Federation have decided against accepting the registration of Dani Olmo and the other young talent, Pau Victor.
So much has happened in the past 24 hours, it's insane.
Breaking news, TikTok will be banned in the United States on January 19th, so says the Federal Appeals Court in Washington, D.C.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 You are the media now. With those 5 words, Elon Musk captured a revolution. A podcaster turns down a presidential candidate. A YouTuber draws more viewers than CNN. And thousands of journalists lose their jobs. The mainstream media empire that shaped our world for a century is crumbling. This isn't just another story about changing technology. It's about the complete transformation of how we understand truth itself. For decades, mainstream media dominated how we understood the world. Newspapers landed on doorsteps each morning. Evening news broadcasts drew millions. Media empires like Times Mirror, Knight Ridder, and Garnet weren't just journalism powerhouses. They were advertising giants, controlling what we read, watched, and believed. But that world is vanishing before our eyes. In its place, a new media landscape is emerging, one that's more fragmented, more personal, and perhaps more dangerous than anything we've seen before. The statistics paint a picture of an industry in freefall, and 2024 might be the most devastating year yet. Since 2008, newsroom employment has plunged over 26%, with job losses surging by nearly 50% in 2023 alone. The carnage is everywhere. BuzzFeed News shut down completely. Sports Illustrated decimated its staff with layoffs by email. The Los Angeles Times cut 20% of its newsroom in a single day. Time magazine slashed 15% of their unionized staff, while Business Insider let go of 8% of their workforce. But these headlines only tell part of the story. The very foundation of media economics is crumbling. Newspaper advertising revenue, once the industry's lifeblood, has collapsed from $49 billion in 2006 to less than $10 billion by 2022. Magazine newsstand revenues show an equally stark decline, plummeting from $7 billion to just $1 billion over the same period. Daily newspaper circulation continues its freefall, dropping another 8% in just the past year. The crisis isn't cyclical, it's structural. Workers at Condé Nast, Forbes, and the New York Daily News have walked out to protest looming cuts. NPR, Vice, Vox, NBC News, Texas Tribune, WNYC, the list of organizations slashing jobs grows longer every month. Even digital native outlets aren't immune. As one TV executive told New York Magazine, if half the country has decided that Trump is qualified to be president, that means they're not reading any of this media, and we've lost this audience completely. But if traditional media is dying, who's inheriting their power to shape our world? The decline traces back to a perfect storm of technological disruption that transformed every aspect of how news works. As tech analyst Benedict Evans explains, there's very little you can say about the finances of the newspaper industry that you couldn't have said 15 or 20 years ago. The old model went away. You had an oligopoly over both advertisers and readers, and real estate agents and car dealers paid for your social purpose. Now, they don't need you. This shift was revolutionary. When the internet arrived, it shattered media's monopoly on information. Real estate agents and car dealers could suddenly reach customers directly online. They didn't need newspapers anymore. Digital advertising became targeted and measurable. Companies finally knew exactly which half of their ad budget was working, and they increasingly chose to spend it elsewhere. But it wasn't just advertising that changed. Our entire relationship with information transformed. The concept of mainstream media arose in the 20th century when reaching a mass audience required infrastructure, a printing press, broadcast frequency, or physical cable into people's houses. sources. That reality made the media easy to control and criticize. As Richard Nixon's speechwriter William Safire noted in 1975, the press became the media because the word had a manipulative Madison Avenue all-encompassing connotation, and the press hated it. Today, that model is obsolete. Smartphones put breaking news in our pockets. Young people especially gravitate towards personalized, on-demand content. Why wait for the evening news when breaking stories appear instantly on social media? The old model of one-size-fits-all journalism can't compete with the algorithms serving exactly what each person wants to see. Even more importantly, the rise of social media platforms has completely transformed how information spreads, creating a world where traditional gatekeepers have lost their power. And when anyone can reach millions with a single post, does truth still matter? The social media revolution completely transformed how news spreads. According to recent data, 54% of Americans now get at least some of their news from social platforms. Compare that to traditional sources: 63% from television, 42% from radio, and just 26% from print publications. This shift hasn't just changed where people get their news, it's changed how they consume it. On social media, news competes with entertainment, personal updates, and viral content. Stories spread based on engagement rather than importance. One of the most influential news sources today are clippers, people who watch hours of political rallies and TV appearances just to share brief, often controversial moments online. These clips can drive days of discussion, especially when the context is disputed. Perhaps the most damaging blow to the mainstream media wasn't technological, it was psychological. Public trust in traditional news outlets has been in free fall. A recent Gallup poll showed about 40% of Americans have zero confidence in media reporting. Years of perceived bias, sensationalism, and mishandled stories left deep scars. The rise of misinformation on social platforms further muddied the waters, making it harder to separate fact from fiction. This erosion of trust created a vicious cycle. As people lost faith in traditional media, they turned to alternative sources. These sources often criticized mainstream outlets, further undermining their credibility. The mainstream media's response, often dismissive or defensive, only accelerated the exit. Now here's a troubling question. How can CNN critically report on pharmaceutical companies when those same companies provide millions in advertising revenue? This isn't just about one network or one industry. It's about a system-wide conflict of interest that shapes what we see and what we don't see in the news. The numbers tell a shocking story of consolidation. Just 5 major conglomerates, Comcast, Disney, Fox Corporation, Paramount Global, and Warner Brothers Discovery, control most of what Americans see and hear. Think about that. 5 companies deciding what stories matter for hundreds of millions of people. This influence isn't limited to corporate advertising. Sometimes it comes directly from government funding. Take Canada, for example. In 2019, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made a revealing comment at the Parliamentary Press Gallery dinner. He joked about media's favorable coverage of his government, linking it to the $600 million his administration provides to support struggling news organizations. Though meant as humor, this joke exposed an uncomfortable truth. When media outlets depend on government or corporate funding for survival, their ability to report becomes compromised. This concentration of power creates an invisible wall of silence. Stories that might harm corporate interests often go untold or get buried. Critical investigations get softened. Tough questions don't get asked. It's not always direct censorship. Sometimes it's an understanding that certain topics are off limits if you want to keep the lights on. When half of Americans believe national news organizations intend to mislead, misinform, or persuade through their reporting, is it any wonder? The public isn't just losing trust in the media. They're seeing through the corporate curtain that's been hiding these conflicts of interest for decades. But if we can't trust the mainstream media anymore, can we trust what's replacing it? Into this vacuum stepped a new generation of media voices. Joe Rogan's podcast now draws more viewers than cable news networks. His recent Trump interview hit over 50 million views on YouTube alone in a month, dwarfing traditional TV audiences. By comparison, a major interview on Fox News, the most watched cable network, only drew 8 million viewers. These new media figures operate under different rules. They're more personal, more partisan, and often more entertaining. During Trump's victory speech in Florida, he invited UFC boss Dana White to speak. White thanked a list of new media figures: streamer Aiden Ross, podcaster Theo Von, the YouTubers known as the Nelk Boys, and former NFL players turned content creators. These weren't traditional journalists. They were entertainers who had hosted Trump for casual, often flattering interviews. This transformation represents a fundamental shift in media power. When Joe Rogan turned down an interview with vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris because she wouldn't come to his studio, it signaled a new reality. The mainstream media no longer dictates terms. These new voices don't need institutional backing. They have direct connections with their audiences. Even the White House recognizes this change. In 2023, Jill Biden addressed a holiday party for hundreds of influencers, acknowledging them as representatives of the changing way people receive news and information. At the Democratic National Convention, more than 200 content creators were credentialed alongside traditional journalists. This transformation has real consequences for democracy. Since 2005, about 3,000 local newspapers have vanished across America, leaving many communities without professional reporting. These weren't just businesses, they were civic institutions that kept power in check. The economic model that supported journalism is crumbling. And as we mentioned earlier, ad revenue for US newspapers plummeted from $49 billion in 2006 to under $10 billion in 2022. When no one's watching City Hall or digging through documents, corruption flourishes. The loss of local news creates news deserts, communities where citizens have no reliable source of local information. This vacuum often gets filled by partisan sources or social media rumors. Some see hope in the emergence of non-profit newsrooms. Organizations like the Baltimore Banner and Daily Memphian are trying to fill the gaps left by declining newspapers. These outlets prioritize community-focused reporting over profit-driven motives. Independent journalists are finding success on platforms like Substack, while YouTubers and podcasters develop new formats for investigative journalism. But can these new models replace what's being lost? While some independent reporters do excellent work, like CoffeeZilla's investigations into crypto scams or Jason Garcia's coverage of Florida politics, they're surrounded by what critics call a clamorous sea of partisans. The future of news won't look like its past. A few giants like the New York Times and Wall Street Journal may survive through subscriptions. Niche publications serving specific audiences will find their footing. But most news organizations will be smaller, more focused, and likely more partisan. The democratization of media means anyone can now reach millions without corporate backing. But it also means the loss of professional standards and shared facts. The fairness doctrine, which once required broadcasters to present contrasting views, is gone for good. We can't force new media outlets to adopt old standards. As we look ahead, the picture remains uncertain. More conspiracy theories, more noise, more partisan voices seem inevitable. The question isn't whether mainstream media will survive, but what will replace it, and whether that replacement can fulfill journalism's essential role in a democratic society. The story of mainstream media's transformation isn't over. It's still being written, and in many ways, you're part of it. Every time you choose where to get your news, every time you share a story, you're shaping this new media landscape. What do you think comes next? Will citizen journalists replace traditional newsrooms? Can we maintain truth and accuracy without traditional gatekeepers? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective on this. If you found this exploration valuable, help spread the word by hitting that like button and make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.